The millionaire sir remained elusive until he saw a poor sales girl with a bandaged arm as she faces abusive manager in store.
Get back to work, Maya. Those shelves won't stock themselves, and I don't care if your arm is broken in 3 places.
Please, Mr. Henderson. The doctor said I need to.
Hey, Maya, the doctor doesn't pay your salary. I do. And if you can't handle the job with one good arm, maybe you should find somewhere else to work. I won't tolerate this laziness in my store. Is that clear?
The fluorescent lights of MegaMart cast harsh shadows across aisle 7 as Maya Johnson winced, her bandaged left arm throbbing with each movement. The morning rush was beginning, and the grocery section needed restocking before the first wave of customers arrived. At 26, Maya had been working at this store for 3 years, but today felt different. Today, her manager's cruelty cut deeper than usual. What Maya didn't know was that across the store, partially hidden behind a display of seasonal items, stood a man in worn jeans and a simple baseball cap, Alexander Smith, worth $2.8 billion, CEO of Smith Industries, and one of the most powerful men in the country, watched the scene unfold with growing fury. He had come here on a whim, seeking to understand why his newest acquisition, this chain of department stores, was underperforming. He expected to find operational inefficiencies, perhaps outdated systems. He never expected to witness this. You know, stories like this one remind me exactly why we share these moments of human truth here. Because somewhere, right now, someone needs to hear that their worth isn't defined by how others treat them. Welcome back, my lovely family, and if you're new here, welcome to our heartwarming Incredible Stories channel. If you're yet to subscribe, please hit that subscribe button right now as well as the notification button so you don't get to miss the remaining part of this heart-touching story and the one coming up tomorrow. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments section. I pray this story brings you and your family good tidings as always. 3 months earlier, Maya Johnson had been a different person. She lived in a small apartment on the east side of Chicago, sharing the space with her younger brother Marcus, a sophomore at community college. Their parents had died in a car accident 5 years ago, leaving Maya to raise her then 16-year-old brother alone. She worked 2 jobs, MegaMart during the day and cleaning offices at night, to pay for his education and their modest life. Maya had dreams once. She'd graduated with a degree in business management, summa cum laude, from a local university. She'd applied to dozens of companies, attended countless interviews, but somehow, opportunities always seemed to slip through her fingers. Whether it was her background, her address, or something else she couldn't quite name, the corporate world remained closed to her. So she found herself at MegaMart, in the grocery section, stocking shelves and helping customers find items. Despite everything, Maya maintained her dignity. She treated every customer with respect, learned their names when they became regulars, and somehow found joy in the small interactions that made up her day. But her manager, Richard Henderson, seemed determined to break her spirit. A middle-aged man with a perpetual scowl and a Napoleon complex, Henderson ruled the store floor with an iron fist. He seemed to take particular pleasure in singling out Maya, perhaps sensing her education and potential, perhaps threatened by the quiet strength she carried herself with. The accident had happened 3 weeks ago. Maya was rushing to catch the bus after her night cleaning shift when she slipped on black ice. The fall shattered her left arm in multiple places, requiring surgery and a cast that would stay on for at least 2 months. The medical bills were crushing. Her basic insurance covered only a fraction of the costs. When she'd asked Henderson for light duty during her recovery, he'd laughed in her face. "You think this is a charity, Johnson? You work like everyone else, or you don't work at all." Meanwhile, Alexander Smith lived in a world most people could only imagine. His penthouse overlooked Lake Michigan, his companies employed over 100,000 people worldwide, and his wealth could solve problems that seemed insurmountable to others. At 34, He was considered one of the most eligible bachelors in the world, regularly featured on magazine covers and invited to exclusive events. But Alexander carried a burden that money couldn't solve: profound loneliness. He had been born into wealth, the son of industrialist Robert Smith. From childhood, he'd been surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Friends who befriended him for access to his family's influence. Romantic partners who saw dollar signs instead of the person he was inside. Teachers who gave him grades he didn't earn. Colleagues who agreed with him whether he was right or wrong. By the time he inherited control of Smith Industries at 28, Alexander had built walls around himself that seemed impenetrable. He'd had relationships, beautiful, successful women who looked perfect on his arm at charity galas and business dinners. But each relationship followed the same pattern: initial attraction, growing distance as he realized they loved his lifestyle more than him, and eventual dissolution. His assistant, Margaret, often joked that he collected broken hearts like some men collected cars. But Alexander knew the truth. His heart was the one that remained broken, yearning for something real in a world that felt increasingly artificial. The morning Alexander decided to visit MegaMart unannounced, he'd been reviewing quarterly reports that painted a troubling picture. Customer satisfaction scores were plummeting, employee turnover was at an all-time high, and several stores were underperforming significantly. His board of directors was pressuring him to either fix the chain or sell it. "I need to see what's really happening," he told Margaret as he changed out of his tailored suit into clothes he'd borrowed from his building's maintenance staff. "The numbers don't tell the whole story." Margaret had tried to dissuade him. "Sir, we have regional managers for this. District supervisors. You don't need to." "When was the last time I actually talked to a frontline employee?" Alexander had interrupted. "Really talk to them, not at some corporate event where they're too intimidated to tell me the truth." He chose the MegaMart location on the south side almost randomly. It was one of the underperforming stores, and it served a diverse, working-class community. He thought he might learn something about operational challenges, inventory management, or customer service protocols. He never imagined he would witness Maya's quiet heroism. That first morning, as he wandered the store trying to observe naturally, Alexander noticed Maya immediately. Not because she was particularly striking, though she was beautiful in a natural, unadorned way, but because of how she interacted with customers. Despite her obvious pain, despite the heavy cast on her left arm, she took time with each person who approached her. He watched her help an elderly Spanish-speaking woman find ingredients for a traditional recipe, patiently translating labels and offering suggestions. He saw her kneel down, awkwardly, protecting her injured arm, to help a toddler who had dropped his toy. He observed her directing a young father to the baby formula with genuine care, asking about his child's age and dietary restrictions. But he also noticed Henderson's treatment of her. "Johnson, why is that display still not finished? I gave you that task an hour ago." Maya looked up from where she was restocking the lower shelves, sweat beading on her forehead from the effort of working one-handed. "I'm sorry, Mr. Henderson. With my arm. I don't want to hear about your arm again." Henderson's voice carried across the aisle, causing several customers to turn and stare. "Maybe if you spent less time chatting with customers and more time doing your job." Alexander felt something stir inside him, an anger that was both immediate and deeply personal. He had built his entire adult identity around treating people with respect, around using his privilege responsibly. To see Maya being degraded for working harder with one arm than most people worked with two ignited something primal. But this was exactly the kind of situation that had taught him to be cautious. How many times had he rushed to help someone, only to discover their motives were less than pure? How many times had his intervention been followed by demands for money, job opportunities, or connections? So he watched. and waited. And what he saw over the following days as he returned, always in disguise, always observing, began to change everything he thought he knew about human nature. Others who have found themselves in impossible situations have shared their stories in our comments. And I have to say, the strength of the human spirit never ceases to amaze me. Sometimes the people who have the least to give offer the most. Maya never complained. Not once, in all the hours Alexander observed, did he hear her speak negatively about Henderson, despite his increasingly cruel treatment. When other employees expressed sympathy about her situation, Maya deflected. "He's under a lot of pressure," she would say. "The district manager has been coming around more often. I think corporate is pushing for better numbers." Alexander almost laughed at the irony. She was making excuses for her tormentor, not knowing that the corporate pressure she referenced ultimately came from him. But Maya's grace under pressure was only part of what captivated Alexander. It was her genuine care for others that truly amazed him. He watched her use her break time to help train a new employee, showing him the most efficient ways to stock shelves and handle customer questions. He saw her cover for a colleague who needed to leave early for a family emergency, taking on extra work despite her injury. Most remarkably, he observed her interact with customers who were rude or demanding. A well-dressed woman berated Maya for 10 minutes because a sale item was out of stock, calling her incompetent and lazy. Maya listened patiently, apologized sincerely, and then spent 15 minutes calling other store locations to find the item elsewhere. "Why do you let people treat you like that?" Alexander overheard another employee ask her later. Maya's response stopped him in his tracks. "You never know what kind of day someone else is having. Maybe she just got bad news. Maybe she's worried about something at home. A little kindness doesn't cost me anything." By his fourth day of observation, Alexander had made a decision that would have shocked his board of directors and terrified his legal team. He was going to intervene directly. Not as the CEO of Smith Industries, not through official channels or corporate protocols, but as one human being helping another. But Maya's situation was becoming more precarious by the day. Alexander arrived that Thursday morning to find Maya struggling to reach items on a high shelf, her good arm stretched impossibly high while her injured arm hung useless at her side. A customer was waiting impatiently, tapping his foot and checking his phone. "Excuse me," the customer said loudly, "is there someone competent who can help me? This is ridiculous." Maya's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but her voice remained steady. "I'm so sorry, sir. Let me get a stepladder." "Just forget it," the man snapped, walking away. "This store is a joke." Henderson appeared as if summoned by the customer's complaints. "What's the problem here, Johnson?" "I was just trying to help a customer with what he..." "By making him wait while you fumble around? This is exactly what I'm talking about." Henderson's voice was rising again, drawing stares from other shoppers. "You're a liability. Maybe it's time we discussed whether you're really suited for this job." Alexander watched Maya's face crumble slightly, just for a moment, before she composed herself. But in that brief instant, he saw something that cut him to the core: defeat. For the first time since he'd been watching her, Maya Johnson looked like she might break. That afternoon, Alexander made a phone call that would change everything. "Margaret, I need you to run a comprehensive background check on someone." Maya Johnson, employee at the MegaMart location on South State Street. "Sir, full background, employment history, education, family situation, financial status, everything. Mr. Smith, if this is about the store evaluation, just do it, Margaret. And I need it by tomorrow morning." What Alexander learned from Maya's background check only deepened his admiration and strengthened his resolve. Maya had graduated at the top of her business management class but had been supporting her younger brother since their parents' death. Her employment record showed a pattern of jobs taken out of necessity rather than ambition, always in service industries, always positions where she could work around her brother's school schedule. Her financial situation was dire. The medical bills from her accident were crushing, and she was already behind on rent. Her brother Marcus was maintaining a 3.8 GPA at community college, working toward a transfer to a 4-year university, but Maya had been quietly selling her possessions to keep up with his tuition payments. Most telling was a letter of recommendation from her university's dean, written 3 years ago for a job application that had apparently gone nowhere. Maya Johnson represents the best of what business education can achieve, combining analytical skills with genuine empathy, strategic thinking with ethical grounding. Any organization would be fortunate to have her leadership. Alexander spent that evening in his penthouse, staring out at the Chicago skyline and thinking about privilege, purpose, and the strange ways fate brings people together. He had spent years surrounded by Harvard MBAs and Wharton graduates who possessed Maya's educational credentials but lacked her character. He employed thousands of people with impressive resumes who would never show Maya's grace under pressure. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a dangerous thought was forming. What if this wasn't just about helping someone in need? What if this was about finding someone real? The next morning brought the confrontation that would change both their lives forever. Alexander arrived at the store to find Maya sitting in the break room during what should have been her work time, cradling her injured arm and trying not to cry. Through the break room's window, he could see Henderson berating another employee on the floor. "Hey," Alexander said softly, approaching her table. He had abandoned his regular observation spot. This was the first time he had spoken to her directly. "Are you okay?" Maya looked up, startled. She had noticed this customer over the past few days. He seemed to spend a lot of time in the store, always observing, never buying much. But there was something different about him, something that didn't quite fit. "I'm fine," she said automatically, then winced as she moved her arm. "Just taking a break." Alexander sat down across from her, noting the exhaustion in her eyes, the careful way she held herself. "That doesn't look fine. What happened to your arm?" For a moment, Maya studied this stranger who was showing her more kindness than she'd received from her actual supervisor in weeks. Something about his genuine concern broke through her usual defenses. "Accident," she said simply. "Slipped on ice a few weeks ago. Broke it in 3 places. And they have you working like nothing happened?" Maya's eyes flashed, not with anger at her situation, but with defensive loyalty that amazed Alexander. "It's not easy to replace someone. They need to follow basic labor laws," Alexander interrupted gently. "You shouldn't be lifting heavy items or working extended hours with an injury like that." "I can't afford not to work," Maya said quietly, and something in her voice revealed the depth of her desperation. "My brother, he's in college. I have medical bills. I really can't lose this job." Alexander felt something crack inside his chest. Here was a woman with a business degree, clearly intelligent and capable, reduced to accepting abuse because the alternative was financial catastrophe. And not even for herself, for her brother's future. "What if I told you there might be other options?" he said cautiously. Maya looked at him suspiciously. "Like what? And why would you care?" Before Alexander could answer, Henderson's voice boomed across the break room. "Johnson, break time was over 10 minutes ago. Get back on the floor." Maya started to rise, her face flushing with embarrassment at being caught talking to a customer during work hours. But Alexander stood up first. "Actually, I think we need to talk," he said with authority. That got both Henderson and Maya a bit shocked. What happened next would be talked about by MegaMart employees for years to come. Alexander walked out onto the store floor with Maya trailing behind him, confused and increasingly worried about what this customer might say to her manager. Henderson was waiting with his arms crossed, his expression promising consequences. "Sir, I appreciate your concern," Henderson said with false civility, "but employee discipline is not a matter for—" "My name is Alexander Smith," Alexander said quietly, pulling out his phone and showing Henderson a news article with his photo. "I own this store. I own this entire chain. And I've been watching how you treat your employees." The color drained from Henderson's face so quickly that Alexander thought the man might faint. Behind him, Maya made a small sound of shock, her good hand flying to cover her mouth. "Mr. Smith, I had no idea. If I had known you were—" "You had no idea that basic human decency was required?" Alexander's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "You had no idea that treating injured employees with respect was part of your job?" Henderson began stammering excuses, explanations, justifications. Other employees had begun to gather, drawn by the commotion. Customers were stopping to watch. Maya stood frozen, trying to process the revelation that this man she'd been talking to, this person who had shown her more kindness in 5 minutes than she'd received in weeks, was one of the most powerful people in the country. "I want you off this floor," Alexander continued, his eyes never leaving Henderson's face. "Today, clean out your office and go. Security will escort you out." "But sir, you don't understand the pressures I'm under, the targets I have to meet." "I understand perfectly," Alexander said. "I also understand that those pressures never justify abuse. Ms. Johnson?" He turned to Maya, who was still staring at him in shock. "Could I speak with you privately?" Maya nodded mutely, following Alexander to the store's administrative office while Henderson was led away by security guards who had appeared with impressive speed. The other employees dispersed slowly, whispering among themselves about the morning's dramatic events. In the quiet of the empty office, Alexander and Maya faced each other across a conference table that had probably never hosted a conversation as consequential as the one they were about to have. "You're really—" Maya began, then stopped, shaking her head. "I don't understand. Why were you here? Why were you watching?" Alexander sat down heavily, suddenly feeling the weight of the deception he'd been practicing. "The stores haven't been performing well. I wanted to understand why." He paused, meeting her eyes. "I never expected to find this." "So you've been lying to me," Maya said, and there was hurt in her voice that cut Alexander more deeply than he'd anticipated. "You've been pretending to be someone else, watching me make a fool of myself." "You never made a fool of yourself," Alexander interrupted urgently. "Maya, in 4 days of watching you, I saw more integrity and genuine kindness than I've encountered in years of corporate boardrooms. You have nothing to be ashamed of." "But I do," Maya said, tears starting to flow. "I've been barely keeping my head above water, taking abuse from a manager who thought I was worthless, working with a broken arm because I was too scared to stand up for myself. And you saw all of it." Alexander wanted to reach across the table, to comfort her somehow, but he didn't know if he had the right. The power dynamic between them, CEO and minimum wage employee, created a chasm that felt almost unbridgeable. "What you showed me," Alexander said carefully, "was grace under impossible pressure. Kindness when you had every reason to be bitter. Strength when you were literally broken. Maya, I've been in business for over a decade, and I've never seen leadership qualities like yours." Maya laughed bitterly. "Leadership qualities? I stock shelves in a grocery store." "No," Alexander said firmly. "You care for people. You solve problems. You maintain your values when everything around you is falling apart. Those aren't job skills, Maya. That's character." "Character doesn't pay medical bills," Maya said quietly. "What if it could?" Alexander asked. "What if I offered you a different position? Management level, with benefits that would cover your medical expenses and help your brother finish school. Maya stared at him for a long moment. Why would you do that? It was a question Alexander had been asking himself since he'd first watched her help that elderly Spanish-speaking woman. Why was he so invested in this person he barely knew? Why did her struggles feel personal to him? Why did the thought of her accepting charity from him make his chest tight with something that felt dangerously like hope? Because this company needs people like you, he said, which was true but incomplete. And? Maya prompted, displaying the intuition that had first caught his attention. Alexander took a breath, stepping onto ground that felt both terrifying and inevitable. And because I need people like you. The admission hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them was quite ready to examine. Maya studied his face, searching for deception, for the ulterior motives that her life experience had taught her to expect. I don't understand, she said finally. I'm not sure I do either, Alexander admitted. But Maya, I've spent my entire adult life surrounded by people who want something from me. Money, connections, opportunities. And then I watched you for 4 days, saw you treat everyone, customers, coworkers, even Henderson, with more genuine respect than most people in my world show their closest friends. And you never once asked me for anything. I didn't know who you were, Maya pointed out. Exactly, Alexander said. You were kind to a random customer who spent too much time in your store and bought almost nothing. You were patient with someone who had no influence over your job security, no money to offer you, no way to improve your situation. That's not strategy, Maya. That's just who you are. People who have experienced moments of recognition like this, when someone finally sees them for who they really are, have shared some incredible insights in our comments. I'd love to hear your own moments of being truly seen. Maya was quiet for a long time, processing the upheaval of everything she thought she knew about her life. Finally, she spoke. If you offer me this job, how do I know it's not just guilt? How do I know you won't regret it in a few weeks when you realize I'm just a girl from the South Side who's doing her best to survive? Alexander felt something shift inside him, a recognition of the courage it took for her to voice those fears. How do I know you won't accept the job and then treat me like everyone else does once you realize what I can do for you? They looked at each other across the table, two people who had learned to be cautious for very different reasons, both afraid to trust, both desperate to find something real. I guess, Maya said slowly, we'll have to find out. 3 months later, Maya Johnson stood in the same MegaMart where she had once stocked shelves with a broken arm, but everything had changed. She wore a professional blazer and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had discovered her own capabilities. As the store's new assistant manager, she was implementing customer service protocols that had already improved satisfaction scores by 30%. But the real test of her character came on a Tuesday afternoon when Richard Henderson walked through the front doors. Maya was reviewing inventory reports with her team when one of the cashiers approached her nervously. Ms. Johnson? That man by customer service? He says he used to be the manager here. Maya looked up to see Henderson standing awkwardly near the customer service desk, wearing a cheap suit that had seen better days. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like desperation. I'll handle it, Maya said. She approached Henderson with measured steps, acutely aware that every employee in the vicinity was watching to see how she would handle her former tormentor. Henderson's face cycled through shame, defiance, and plea as she drew near. Maya, he said, her first name sounding strange on his lips. He had only ever called her Johnson before. I heard you were promoted. Congratulations. Thank you, Maya replied. What can I help you with, Mr. Henderson? Henderson's composure cracked slightly. It's been hard to find work since what happened. The retail industry is small, and word gets around. I was wondering if you might consider giving me a reference? Or maybe there's a position here that... You want me to give you a reference? Maya asked, her voice carefully controlled. Around them, employees had stopped pretending to work and were openly staring. Henderson seemed to shrink under her gaze. I know I wasn't always fair to you. I was under pressure, and I took it out on people who didn't deserve it. I'm asking if you could find it in your heart to forgive me. Maya studied the man who had made her life miserable for 3 years, who had humiliated her in front of customers and coworkers, who had threatened her job when she was injured and vulnerable. She thought about all the times she had cried in the break room, all the nights she had come home exhausted and demoralized, all the ways his cruelty had made an already difficult situation nearly unbearable. And then she thought about the conversation she'd had with Alexander just the week before. They had been having dinner, something that had become a regular occurrence as their professional relationship evolved into something deeper and more personal. Alexander had been telling her about a board member who had questioned her rapid promotion, suggesting that her rise in the company was due to favoritism rather than merit. What did you tell him? Maya had asked. I told him to look at the numbers, Alexander had replied. Customer satisfaction, employee retention, operational efficiency, every metric has improved since you took over. But honestly, Maya, even if the numbers were terrible, I'd still believe in you. Why? She had asked, though she was beginning to suspect she knew the answer. Because in all my years in business, I've never met anyone who leads with genuine kindness the way you do. You see the best in people, even when they don't deserve it. You make people want to be better versions of themselves. Now, facing Henderson, Maya understood what Alexander had meant. This broken man standing before her wasn't asking for a handout. He was asking for redemption. And she had the power to offer it or deny it. Mr. Henderson, she said finally, her voice clear enough for everyone nearby to hear, you're right that you weren't fair to me. You made my job much harder than it needed to be, and you hurt people who were trying their best. Henderson's face fell, and he started to turn away. But, Maya continued, stopping him, I also know what it's like to need a second chance. There's a cashier position open at our downtown location. It's entry-level, and it would mean starting over. Are you interested? Henderson stared at her in disbelief. You'd really give me a chance? After everything? I believe people can change, Maya said. The question is, do you? 2 weeks later, Alexander stood in the same spot where he had first observed Maya, watching her conduct a staff meeting. She was training her team on a new customer loyalty program, and her natural teaching ability was evident in the way her employees hung on her every word. But Alexander wasn't just there as CEO conducting a business review. Over the past few months, his feelings for Maya had evolved from professional admiration to something much deeper and more complicated. She challenged him intellectually, inspired him morally, and made him laugh in ways he hadn't experienced in years. More importantly, she saw him, not his wealth, not his position, but the man he was underneath all the trappings of success. Their relationship had developed slowly, carefully. Both of them were aware of the power dynamics at play, the potential for conflict of interest, the whispers that would inevitably follow. But they had also discovered something rare and precious, genuine compatibility built on mutual respect and shared values. Maya finished her meeting and walked over to where Alexander was standing, her smile lighting up her entire face. Spying on me again, Mr. Smith? Just appreciating good leadership when I see it, Alexander replied, falling into step beside her as they walked toward her office. I have some news, Maya said, pulling a letter from her desk. Marcus got his acceptance letter to Northwestern. Full scholarship plus a work-study program. Alexander felt a surge of pride and happiness for her. Maya's brother had been accepted to one of the country's top universities, a testament to both his hard work and Maya's sacrifices over the years. "That's incredible, Maya. You should be so proud." "I am," Maya said, but there was something tentative in her voice. "Alex, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Alexander felt his stomach tighten. "Okay. Are we together because you feel sorry for me? Because you want to help me? Or because you actually care about me as a person?" It was the question Alexander had been dreading, the one that cut to the heart of his own insecurities. How could he be sure his feelings were genuine when their relationship had begun with such a dramatic power imbalance? "Maya," he said, "I've been asking myself the same question. And here's what I know. I fell for you before I ever offered you a job. I fell for you when you were stocking shelves with a broken arm and still taking time to help every customer who asked. I fell for you when you defended Henderson even though he was treating you terribly. I fell for your character, your strength, your heart. And now," Maya pressed, "now that I work for you, now that I'm in your world, now I love you even more," Alexander said, the words coming easier than he had expected. "Because I've seen you handle success with the same grace you handled adversity. I've seen you use your position to lift other people up instead of settling scores. Maya, you're not the same person you were 6 months ago, but the core of who you are, the part one fell in love with, that hasn't changed at all." Maya studied his face, searching for any sign of insincerity. What she found instead was vulnerability. This powerful, successful man was just as scared of being hurt as she was. "I love you too," she said without hesitation. "But Alex, I need you to promise me something. If this doesn't work out, if we can't make it as a couple, you won't take away my job. You won't punish me professionally for personal reasons." Alexander understood the request. It was Maya's way of protecting herself, of maintaining some independence even in love. It was also, he realized, exactly the kind of practical wisdom that made him admire her so much. "I promise," he said. "But Maya, I'm not planning on this not working out." 1 year later, Maya Smith stood at the altar of Chicago's most prestigious church, wearing a dress that had cost more than she used to make in 6 months, surrounded by people who represented the pinnacle of business and society. But none of that mattered to her as much as the man standing across from her, tears in his eyes, promising to love and cherish her for the rest of their lives. The wedding was featured in 3 business magazines and 2 society publications. The headlines varied. CO marries employee in fairy tale romance. From minimum wage to millionaire's wife, the Cinderella story of Maya Smith. But those who knew them understood that the real story was much more complex and beautiful than any fairy tale. Alexander had found something he had been searching for his entire adult life. A partner who loved him for who he was rather than what he could provide. Maya had discovered that her worth wasn't defined by her circumstances but by her character. Together, they had built something neither could have achieved alone. 6 months after the wedding, Maya was promoted to regional manager of the MegaMart chain, overseeing 15 stores across the Chicago area. Her innovative customer service programs had become company-wide standards, and employee satisfaction scores had reached all-time highs under her leadership. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came on an ordinary Thursday afternoon when Maya was visiting the original MegaMart location, the store where her journey had begun. She was reviewing quarterly reports with the current store manager when a commotion near the customer service desk caught her attention. A young woman with her arm in a sling was being berated by a customer who was angry about a return policy. The woman was patient and apologetic, trying to explain the procedure while clearly struggling with pain from her injury. Maya walked over and gently intervened, helping resolve the customer's issue while ensuring the injured employee wasn't further stressed. After the customer left, Maya sat down with the young woman. "What happened to your arm?" Maya asked kindly. "Car accident last month," the woman nervously replied, as she discusses personal issues with such a high-ranking company official. "I know it slows me down sometimes, but I really need this job. My daughter just started kindergarten, and I'm on my own." "What's your name?" Maya interrupted. "Sarah. Sarah Martinez." "Sarah, how would you feel about training for a supervisory position? We have an opening in our management development program, and I think you might be perfect for it." Sarah stared at her in shock. "But I just started here 2 months ago. I don't have a college degree. I don't understand why you'd—" "Sometimes," Maya said with a smile that held memories of her own journey, "the best leaders are people who understand what it means to struggle. People who know how to treat others with kindness because they remember what it feels like to need kindness themselves." That evening, Maya returned to the penthouse she now shared with Alexander, finding him on the balcony overlooking the city. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her head against his shoulder. "Good day?" Alexander asked, covering her hands with his. "The best kind of day," Maya replied. "I think I found our next regional manager." Alexander turned in her arms, studying her face. After more than a year together, he still marveled at the way Maya's eyes lit up when she talked about developing other people's potential. Another project? Another person who just needs someone to believe in them, Maya corrected. "Someone who reminds me a lot of myself a year ago." "Scared, broke, and working with a broken arm?" Alexander teased gently. "Strong, determined, and kind despite having every reason not to be," Maya countered. Alexander pulled her closer, thinking about the chain of events that had brought them together. If he hadn't decided to visit that store anonymously, if Maya hadn't shown such grace under pressure, if either of them had been less willing to take emotional risks, their love story might never have happened. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Leaving your old life behind?" Maya considered the question seriously. Her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. She lived in luxury now, traveled the world with Alexander, had access to opportunities she'd never dreamed possible. But she also faced scrutiny from people who questioned whether she deserved her success, pressure from those who expected her to change, and the constant challenge of staying true to herself in a world that often rewarded different values. "I don't regret falling in love with you," she said finally. "I don't regret accepting the job that let me discover what I was capable of. But Alex, I never left my old life behind. I brought the best parts of it with me." Alexander understood what she meant. Maya had never lost her empathy for struggling people, her appreciation for small kindnesses, her understanding that everyone deserved dignity regardless of their circumstances. If anything, her success had amplified these qualities rather than diminishing them. "The girl who helped that elderly Spanish-speaking woman find ingredients," Alexander said, remembering one of his first observations of her. "She's still there." "She's still here," Maya corrected, placing his hand over her heart. "And she always will be." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the lights of Chicago twinkle below them. Somewhere in the city, Sarah Martinez was probably tucking her daughter into bed, wondering if the conversation with Maya Smith had been real or too good to be true. Somewhere else, Richard Henderson was finishing his shift as a cashier, still learning what it meant to treat people with respect. And in offices and stores across the country, other young women were facing their own challenges, needing someone to see their potential and give them a chance. "I have an idea," Maya said suddenly, turning to face Alexander with the expression he'd learned meant she was about to propose something ambitious and wonderful. "What if we created a leadership development program specifically for frontline employees? People who show character and potential but maybe don't have traditional qualifications." Alexander smiled, recognizing the passion in her voice that had first captivated him. Tell me more. We could identify employees like Sarah, like the person I used to be. Provide them with mentorship, training, educational opportunities. Not charity, but investment in people who understand what excellent customer service really means because they've been on both sides of it. The Maya Smith Leadership Initiative? Alexander suggested. Maya laughed, shaking her head. The Second Chance Leadership Program. Because everyone deserves the opportunity to become who they're meant to be. As they talked through the logistics of Maya's vision, Alexander reflected on the irony of their situation. He had spent years believing that genuine people were impossibly rare, that everyone wanted something from him, that real love was incompatible with real wealth. Maya had spent years believing that her background would always hold her back, that she would never escape the cycle of surviving rather than thriving. Both of them had been wrong, and both of them had been right. Genuine people were rare, which made finding each other precious. Everyone did want something, but Maya wanted the same things Alexander wanted: love, respect, partnership, and the chance to make a positive difference in the world. Her background had shaped her, but it had shaped her into someone extraordinary rather than someone limited. If you've experienced your own moment of unexpected recognition, when someone saw your potential even when you couldn't see it yourself, I'd love for you to share that story in the comments below. And don't forget to let us know where you're watching from, because these stories of human connection happen everywhere, in every corner of the world. 6 months later, the Second Chance Leadership Program graduated its first class of 12 participants. Sarah Martinez was among them, promoted to assistant manager at a suburban location where her bilingual skills and natural empathy made her invaluable to the diverse customer base. Maya spoke at the graduation ceremony, held in the conference room of Smith Industries headquarters. Looking out at the faces of these men and women who had been given opportunities to grow beyond their circumstances, she felt a sense of purpose that went far beyond personal success. "A year and a half ago," Maya began, "I was stocking shelves with a broken arm, believing that was the extent of what I was capable of. I was wrong. Not because my circumstances changed, but because someone helped me see that my circumstances didn't define my potential." She paused, making eye contact with each graduate. Each of you has shown that character matters more than credentials, that kindness is a form of strength, and that the people who understand struggle are often the ones best equipped to help others overcome it. After the ceremony, as Maya mingled with the graduates and their families, she overheard a conversation that stopped her in her tracks. "I can't believe Maya Smith used to work at MegaMart like us," one woman was saying to another. "She's so poised now, so confident. It's like she was born to this life." "No," said the other woman, whom Maya recognized as one of Sarah's former coworkers. "That's not it at all. She's exactly the same person she always was: kind, smart, hardworking. The difference is that now she's in a position where those qualities are valued instead of taken for granted." Maya smiled to herself, understanding that this was perhaps the greatest validation of her journey. She hadn't become someone else to fit into Alexander's world. She had found a space where she could be fully herself and be appreciated for it. That evening, Maya and Alexander hosted a small dinner party for the program graduates and their families. The penthouse, usually reserved for corporate entertaining and society events, was filled with children's laughter, multiple languages, and the kind of authentic joy that money couldn't buy but that made wealth meaningful. Sarah Martinez approached Maya during dessert, her 5-year-old daughter Sophia in tow. "Mrs. Smith, I don't know how to thank you for this opportunity." "You don't thank me," Maya replied, kneeling down to Sophia's level. "You pay it forward. Someday, when you're in a position to help someone else, you remember what it felt like to need a chance." "I will," Sarah promised. "I absolutely will." As the evening wound down and their guests departed, Maya and Alexander found themselves back on the balcony where they had planned the leadership program. The city spread out below them, millions of lights representing millions of lives, millions of dreams, millions of people who were either helping each other or missing the opportunity to do so. "Penny for your thoughts," Alexander said, wrapping his arms around his wife. "I was thinking about something my mother used to say," Maya replied. "She told me that we're all just walking each other home, that life is about the kindness we show along the way." She sounds like she was a wise woman. She was. I think she would have liked you. Even though I'm a billionaire CEO who used to spy on her daughter while pretending to be a regular customer? Alexander asked with mock concern. Maya laughed, the sound carrying across the Chicago night. Especially because of that. She always said the best love stories start with someone seeing who you really are when you think no one is looking. Alexander considered this, thinking about all the moments that had led them here. Maya's grace under pressure, her kindness to difficult customers, her loyalty to people who hadn't earned it. All of it had happened when she thought she was unobserved, when she had no reason to perform or impress. That was when her true character had shone through. "Your mother was definitely wise," he agreed. "I fell in love with who you were when you thought no one was looking." "And I fell in love with the man who looked," Maya replied. "Not because he was rich or powerful, but because he cared enough to really see." 3 years after their wedding, Maya Smith stood once again in a MegaMart store, but this time, she was cutting the ribbon at the grand opening of the company's flagship location. The store featured innovations she had developed: multilingual customer service stations, community meeting spaces, and a cafe that employed graduates from the Second Chance Leadership Program. Alexander watched from the crowd as Maya spoke to the gathered employees, customers, and local officials. He still marveled at her natural ability to connect with people from all walks of life, to make everyone feel seen and valued. "This store represents more than retail," Maya was saying. "It represents the belief that businesses can be forces for good in their communities, that success should be measured not just in profits but in the positive impact we have on people's lives." After the ceremony, as they walked through the store together, Alexander pointed to a young man restocking shelves in the grocery section. The employee was working methodically, taking time to help customers who approached him, maintaining a positive attitude despite the mundane nature of his task. "He reminds me of someone," Alexander said with a smile. Maya followed his gaze and nodded. "Let's keep an eye on him. You never know, he might be our next regional manager." As they left the store that day, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a girl stocking shelves with a broken arm to a woman leading a multimillion-dollar division, from someone who felt invisible to someone who made it her mission to see others, the transformation was remarkable but also deeply rooted in who she had always been. The media would continue to call it a Cinderella story, but Maya knew better. Cinderella had been rescued by magic and external forces. Maya had been seen, supported, and given opportunities, but the strength, integrity, and vision she brought to her role had always been inside her. Alexander hadn't created those qualities. He had simply recognized them and provided a platform for them to flourish. Thank you for taking this journey with us today. Stories like Maya and Alexander's remind us that everyone has untapped potential, and sometimes all it takes is one person willing to look beyond the surface to change everything. If you've been moved by their story, please share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know where in the world you're watching from. Your own story of resilience and recognition might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And so, in the end, Maya Johnson Smith had found something she'd never dared to dream of, not just financial security or professional success, but a love built on genuine recognition and mutual respect. Alexander Smith had found what had eluded him for decades: a partner who loved him for his character rather than his circumstances. Together, they had built more than a successful marriage or thriving business. They had created a legacy of seeing potential in others, of using privilege responsibly, and of proving that the most powerful force in any organization is the simple recognition that everyone deserves dignity, opportunity, and the chance to become who they're meant to be. The millionaire CEO had indeed remained elusive until he saw a poor salesgirl's bandaged arm. But what he discovered when he truly looked was not someone to be pitied or saved, but someone to be admired, loved, and learned from. And in the end, they had saved each other. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to subscribe and share your own experiences in the comments. Sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin in the most ordinary places, and your story might inspire someone who needs to hear it today. Let us know where you're watching from around the world, because human kindness and recognition happen everywhere, and every story matters. Make sure to hit the notification button so you don't miss the next incredibly heartwarming story tomorrow.